Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today to talk about everyone's favorite topic, low code versus no code. Just going to spend a minute here doing a short introduction of myself and a bit about the business, and then we're going to jump right into the current state of low code and no code development platforms. We'll try to spend a lot of time actually building software. The great thing about having a no code platform like we do is you don't have to talk about it, you can actually show it. And would love all your questions. So please, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A as we're going. And we'll also try to reserve some time at the end for that. So just very briefly, my background, CMO, also part of the founding team at Unqork that got the business started a number of years ago. Prior to Unqork, really my entire career has been in customer experience design in the biggest of enterprises. So I've had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest companies in the world, spanning many industries from retail to financial services, insurance, and beyond. And really have an interesting perspective on the intersection between design and technology and the need for businesses to be able to innovate and transform, and certainly in light of the current environment, move at the speed that residents and that consumers expect. So we'll be trying to bring in a bit of that perspective as we get going. And we're really going to focus today on enterprise topics. So, when people talk about low code, no code, all different ways of building software, oftentimes no code could mean many different things. What we're focused on here today is the very top of the enterprise, applications that are built really for the largest of companies, and a totally new way to construct software to be able to move at speeds that were not previously possible with the prior techniques. So just a bit of a primer here. And many of us that come from enterprise software are familiar with these concepts, but big companies are still spending most, or if not all, a little bit more than half of their money developing custom software. So this is just kind of a quick glance at the market right now. And certainly large enterprises, big cities, large organizations are using a lot of packaged software. They're using a lot of other capabilities, but still a big bulk of what a big business needs, they find themselves having to create themselves. And that is, it's for a variety of reasons. Over the years, packaged software has been able to address a lot of issues that big companies run into, but it's very hard to customize. So many businesses find that in order to really express their competitive advantage, what makes this insurance carrier better than that insurance carrier, they find themselves having to customize and create their own software. So that's okay. There's nothing wrong with creating your own software. The problem, though, what has happened over the course of the last few decades as we've been tracking this, is that the tools, the way that we create software, just haven't kept up. And this is fascinating research that we uncovered a couple of months ago. It's also current. It's from 2019. And it shows that from the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s, enterprises, big businesses, were getting much more efficient at creating large and complex software. And what we're looking at here is the typical hours, from 18,000 all the way down to a bottom of 9,000 in the 2000s. So this is how many hours it typically takes to create an enterprise application. And the reason it was getting better is because we developed better coding techniques, better reuse techniques. IT organizations became more efficient, no doubt. But something nasty started happening in the 2010s, and it's actually spiking and getting worse towards the end of the 2010s. All of the legacy infrastructure, all the code, waiting over 20, 30, 40 years, it started to hit a logjam. And all this code now requires intense amount of monies to maintain. It requires armies of developers to change, make even the smallest change to a system. And the kind of the whole reason that the low code space, and to the most extent the no code space, found ourselves standing up, is we need to reverse this trend. We have to put a new toolkit into the hands of large organizations so they could frankly write software better, and perhaps as important, maintain it easier on a go-forward basis. So you don't need nearly as many people, and certainly to reduce the complexity. And even if you do have as many people, allow them to focus on building great new things rather than maintaining the old. So, many of us in technology, we understand the challenges that continue to exist. So particularly when we're thinking about enterprises, the biggest of companies, most of them still are having to hard code and hand code all their rules and all their processes. Most big companies are running dozens, sometimes hundreds of versions of the same system. We come across big financial services customers that have many, many core banking systems. And then it's very difficult to integrate, because when you have to use code, you need lots of developers to take one data out of one system, to put it into another system, to do something efficient. And all that just requires time. And ultimately, the implications of all of this is it's expensive and slow to write the important software that we need. And again, thinking about this in the context of today, the environment we're in, when anything that's not digital pretty much means you can't access it, from selling an insurance policy to even getting married, like you can now in the city of New York using Unqork online. If it's legacy and old and requires face-to-face interaction and not digital, it's just simply not going to work. So clearly, we have to address this issue. Just spend a minute here on this kind of walk of the way that technology has developed over the years. Through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, programming languages they did get better. So it became, and we saw that a couple of slides ago, as the productivity improved. We were able to have more code reuse. People were getting better at collaborating. And from the lower level languages all the way up to those things that were popular in the 2010s, again, the technology kept pace. But what has changed now is the fundamental need to move vastly faster, and also to kind of tool up a different resource to be able to build software. So gone are the days where we can wait for our programmers and wait for our technology partners to be building all these fantastic dreams we have, all these amazing pieces of software. We need to respond to consumer and resident demand today, at the speed of a crisis, at the speed of the economy. And the whole idea of no code is to allow you to configure software visually using drag and drop techniques without having to be a coder. You have reusable components that you're able to stack together. You've got the ability to actually express really complex rules without having to hard code them using, lines of Java or lines of Python. And the other trick to no code is you generally get everything all in one place, at least in enterprise no code platforms like Unqork. So you don't have to, as a developer or a business person, worry about the security and the compliance and the hosting and where are you going to put this and in what cloud provider, and does it work in Europe, and does it work on the scale of New York City. All of that has been abstracted away. So you as the developer or you as the business person can really just focus on dragging and dropping, visually creating rules, and developing the software that you know that you need. A bit more of what we'd love to go into. So often there's kind of two approaches in the industry when you think about these higher productivity tools. There was a wave of low-code tools. Most of them were developed about 20 years ago. Many of them are actually quite old now in terms of their technology and their ability to deploy easily to the cloud. And then there's no-code. So what we're going to do today is we'll go through a little bit of the background of low and no-code, kind of describing who historically have the different approaches been better for. We'll try to dive as deeply as we can, and we'll respond to questions on the technology itself, like really what is the difference between low code and no code. And then probably as important, the economics of each approach. Why might one favor low code over no code? Obviously our punchline is why would no code be the right solution in nearly all circumstances, but really showing the kind of hard and fast numbers that are going to drive the outcomes. So to jump in now, low code versus no code. Low code, again, the history, most of these companies started in the early 2000s. The average age of when they started is somewhere around 18 years. And they grew up and to address, and they were founded with a noble idea in mind. It's to address this kind of this observation that developer productivity was slowing down a bit. And the idea around a low-code platform is inherent in the name. There still is some coding, but there's lower coding than perhaps if you had to handwrite everything entirely from scratch. And most of the low code that we've seen over the years have been more workflow kind of internal back-end systems. So think, how to get someone from point A to point B. Maybe you call a customer service line and the rep picks up and you have to help, change something on your bank account, and they're able to kind of look it up quickly and make a step change or two. But the interesting thing is that it still requires a lot of code. So what we'll go into today is that these low-code platforms, they do allow you to drag and drop, create some interfaces, create some screens and workflows, but they, by design, and this is baked into the way they created their platforms, in order to do the very complex things, you still have to do it in code. Now, the low-code platforms feel that that's an asset. They say that, coders have these great skills and they have the ability to manipulate data and to do all these integrations. Fast forwarding a little bit, I think you'll see we have a very strong bias against that. We believe that the presence of code at all in a low-code platform is actually what makes them unable to handle the most complex use cases. The other thing about code in a low-code platform, even if it's less code than manual, is you still have to learn all of these proprietary scripting languages. So every low-code platform is going to have their own approach. So it's yet another language that you have to teach your developers. And if you look at the no-code alternative, and so when we say no-code, we only put products in that category that are truly no code, where you can't write code, you can't inject code. The way to do the complex things are done without code. Look, we had the benefit of coming up in the later 2010s. Unqork was founded in 2017. Some of the other businesses that are doing simpler versions were started maybe around the same time or a bit later. And the fact that we have a great cloud infrastructure beneath us, the fact that we have the computing power on our phones and on our desktops to be able to drive all this, this fast development, allowed us to create a platform where all of the complexity that you want to create in an app, you can do truly without code. And how do we do it? That's what we'll go into today. So basically, rather than having to code, you substitute all the need for those hundreds, thousands, millions of lines of code by just truly drag and dropping everything. And this is a design principle. Very specifically, you can't script, you can't code, because if we, quote unquote, force you into using the tools we provide, it keeps you from getting into trouble, and it guarantees that you'll always be able to have an upgrade path moving forward. A bit of how this works. So look on the left, this is a typical low-code platform. So the way that it would work is maybe you're creating a piece of software and it has some fields and you want to collect some data from someone. So the low-code platform does allow you to drag and drop the fields, and you could drop them onto a screen, maybe like a demo that I'll show you later. But when you really want to start doing complex things like the interaction between one field and another, or driving a business rule, or maybe someone is trying to register for a marriage license and you need to go off and you need to charge their credit card, or you need to ask them to upload a picture of their driver's license. All of that in the low-code world, that has to still happen with code. So you're kind of popping open this little module and you're typing in code and you're creating more code, And of course, the downside there is everyone codes differently. And if you write a line of code, you're going to be maintaining that, as we know now, for the next 50 years. So if you switch to the right side here, the difference in no code is, again, we don't let you write code. You don't need to. So if you want to go and you want to charge a credit card, just drag in the credit card processing service. And if we don't have it already configured, or if a different platform doesn't, then you just, again, drag and drop, you connect it to that service, and you're able to do a credit card. And the fact that there is no code injected is what allows you to move at these record paces. We'll show results a little bit later, but we know that by sticking to just the drag and drop techniques and avoiding the legacy cruft that comes with the code, even if it's just a bit of how you're building, you're able to move dramatically faster. The other thing is it's much easier to do. So you don't need to be a coder. Some of our favorite stories are new employees that come in as analysts or management consultants, or maybe accountants, or maybe they come from fashion or luxury or totally different spaces. You don't need to be a coder in order to actually use no code. It's kind of inherent in the name. So the idea is, if you're a coder, that's terrific. If you know how to build software, awesome. But if you don't have a coding background, you could still learn the techniques. There's also many, many fewer errors. We all hear the horror stories about these systems that get launched, like voting systems or healthcare systems, and they're riddled with bugs from day one. And the reason is because it required thousands of people to be going in there and typing all the code. And again, even in a low code environment, if you're developing some great software, you're still going to need hundreds or dozens of people going in there and typing code. And every time you type code, you can make mistakes. You could have one little syntax error. You can incorrectly type in a variable name. Whereas no code, it reduces those errors because visually right there, it's actually showing you, hey, as you're building this, you made a mistake. You connected these two things wrong. The other thing that I want to point out is not just are we future-proofing when you use no code, because anytime a no code platform upgrades its technology, by default, you get upgraded. There's flexibility because it's easier to build. Generally, you could go in and if you need to change a rule, let's say urgently or in an emergency because something just changed in the economy or with a health crisis, you could go into your no-code software. You could make the change, quickly deploy it through the process, and bring it to your end customers or your end residents. So to focus on a bit on the technology side, to turn here just for a second, then I'll pause and we'll look for a question or two. There is a big difference between the technology behind low code and no code as well. So in low code, generally, basic things like we've been talking about, you can drag and drop. So generally, you could drop some fields on. We'll show some examples in our system of how you do that easily too. And that's almost where the easy part stops. So you could generally drag and drop, but when you want to get into more complex validations, you're going to be falling back to some of that scripting. Low-code platforms are good for back-end workflow. That's kind of what they were built for. So if you're thinking about a back-end system, maybe it doesn't have a lot of customer interaction. It could be an option. You might be restricted to just pre-built modules that are already there. Again, if you want a new module, you could go out and you can code it. And if you think about integrations on low code, they're also generally done with code. So all of us in enterprise IT, we know that typically integrating two systems together, taking data from your financial system and putting it into your HR system, those are the things that take a lot of time. Those are the things that are also error prone. And we would say the unfortunate thing about a low code approach is to do integration still requires code. And if coding is the hardest part of any enterprise project, then okay, you've maybe fixed a little bit of the front end problem of dragging and dropping fields, but we're not quite sure how much you've solved the integration problem, which is totally different when we think about it on the no code side. And if we look at no code, what we find, what the industry has been seeing, certainly our customers have been seeing, you can build completely rich end-to-end applications, which start at the consumer tier, which run on mobiles and web browsers, and go all the way back into your workflow. So you don't find yourself having to write your workflow in this system, write your front end in that system. The benefit is you can write it in one place and use it everywhere. And today, maybe another thing, focusing on integrations, what we'll talk about is integrations in a no-code platform are also done without code. It's a beautiful thing. So if you have an external data source, or if you have some really urgent overlay, a piece of data mapping that you want to pull into your system, in a low-code environment, you're still going to have to code it. In no-code, again, you drag and drop it in, and you do all the necessary data manipulation that you need. So I'm going to take a breath here for a second. I see a couple of questions coming in. So I'm going to look at this second question, which is coming in here. And it says, is there multiple no-code platforms as configurator? I need to know every detail of components for each platform, or is there a standard across? So it's a very good question. I think what the asker is getting at is essentially, do all no-code platforms have a very similar way of configuration? And the answer is no, they don't. And there are what you find in most no-code platforms is they've been created for single purpose. Go into this a little bit more later, but what you will see is, there's great no-code platforms to build a website. There's great no-code platforms to build a survey. There's we would say nearly none, if other than Unqork, that on an enterprise tier, you could build everything that you need to know from a software perspective. But no-code platforms are going to have a somewhat different approach each time you do the configuration of them. Maybe it's a good time. I want to show you some of this. So I think to really drive home the difference between the low and the no approach, I wanted to show just how easy it would be to start building some things inside of Unqork, inside of a no-code environment. And I actually picked 3 examples here, which we could have some fun with, which typically, and if we look at the documentation of many of the low-code providers, typically are really hard to do in low-code. So, this first one, wizard with milestone navigation, many of the low-code platforms, you could go to their documentation online and you could say, okay, in order to build a wizard with milestone navigation, which I'll describe in a second what that is, here's how you do it. You drag and drop all this code in, you change the code here, you change it there, and it's a pretty burdensome process. But I'll show the alternative of how you would pull that off entirely visually without code. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump into the back end of Unqork. So what I'm oriented to right now is essentially the environment that Unqork employees, that more than that, though, the customers that license Unqork, their staffs are using to build software, as well as all of the large consulting firms that have built practices around Unqork. So in the back over here is where you actually do all the software building. And we're going to go back. We're going to build that thing, a wizard with milestone navigation, which we've seen in the low-code side takes, dozens, if not hundreds of lines of code. We're going to be able to do that just using drag and drop. So the way that you might set that up in Unqork is as a workflow. And what I'll do here is show a bit of the workflow mechanics, how it all lines up. So essentially, we're looking at a workflow builder. And in this environment, you're able to create the multiple steps that you'd need in any software process. So we are going to call this a multi-step wizard workflow. And we're going to demonstrate how you could kind of show your progress through the multiple steps. And maybe we'll come up with, so actually just because it's top of mind, because, Unqork did just deploy this for New York City, we're going to do a marriage workflow. So, in step 1, you are going to identify a spouse or 2. In step 2, you're going to upload some documentation. And in step 3, we're going to issue you a marriage license. And the way that you would do that is you're going to drag in a couple of tasks. So I'll bring this here. And I'm going to wire the tasks together. Now, in this case, because there's 3 steps, I'm saying that they're each equally weighted. I want to show you your % progress as you're going. So this first step, I'm going to ask for some basic couple information. I'm going to create a module, which is the equivalent of a screen for that. In the second step, I'm going to ask for some documentation. And again, I'll do the same. And then in the third step, I'm going to ask you for a signature. And we're going to issue your marriage license right here. So that's it. If I click save, I now have a multi-step workflow. And what's pretty cool here is I can either show you what step you're on. You're on step 1, step 2, or step 3. Or in this case, specifically what my business partner tasked me with here is they said, well, I want to show your percentage as you're going. How close am I to getting my marriage certificate? So if I save this, now I'm going to go into this first step. And for the case of this demo, I'm actually not going to build the entire thing out. I'm just going to show you the examples of what some of these steps could look like. So maybe on the first information screen where we're asking for couple information, I'm going to ask for your first name. And I'm going to ask for your last name. So I'm dragging in fields from our component toolkit on the left here and bringing them into the canvas, which is where on the right, you're actually doing all of your layout. And what I might want to do here is actually do this a little bit differently. I want to add in here, are we indicating this for the first spouse or for the second spouse? So I'm going to say, which spouse is this for? And I'm going to create a quick choice. This is for spouse A, and this is for spouse B. So you can tell me, is it the first one or is it the second one? And just to show you quickly how this all works, I'm going to save it. And before I go any further in the process, I'm going to come back and I'm going to demo to you the software that I've been building. So right now you're seeing the back end, and now for the first time, I'm going to show you the front end of this software. So if I bring it up, you'll see now that it's rendered a multi-step process, and it's showing me this progress bar. So it's saying you're on step 1, and you're at this point about 33% done. We could show the step numbers if not. And I could come in here and I could put in my name and say that I'm spouse A. Now, something else that's super interesting about Unqork, I'm going to show another kind of no-code detail here, which would be tricky to pull off in a low-code system. Let's say at this point, you said, well, hold on a second, where do I collect the first name and the last name for spouse B? You only added the fields for spouse A. You know, you could go in a low-code system and maybe code around that and add the ability to add multiple. But again, in Unqork, you're going to do all of that without code. So I'm going to come in, and we have the concept of, we call it an advanced data grid. And it's basically a way to do multiple of what you just did as one thing. So we already have spouses, and spouses have a first name, and spouses have a last name, and they have which spouse they are. So we'll just go with first, last, and which. And if I save this and now bring these fields, again, visually, I didn't have to code anything. I didn't have to tell the system anything other than the fact that these are all, they all have a relationship. And if I save it and I come back out here and I reload, I want to show you the screen's going to look very differently right now. So now I can actually add multiple spouses. So I could come in and I could put myself as spouse A. I could also come in and little did my wife know that she is making it as a featured guest in our demo here, and we have spouse B. Okay, great. Now I want to show the rest of this thing built out. And we'll do this in this case just kind of quickly. So I'm going to come in, edit the next module, and in this case, I'm going to ask you to actually upload some documentation. So I'm going to use my file component, I'm going to drag it in, and I'm going to ask you to upload your driver's license. For example, obviously we could ask that of both spouses. And then on the last page, I'm going to ask you for a signature. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to edit the module again, and I'm going to bring in my signature component. And we're integrated with a lot of the popular e-signature platforms as well. Of course, you could use this one here. And now if I go back out to where we were and we look at the multi-step, so here's step 1. Now I'm going to go to step 2. You could see that it's shown that now I'm 2/3 of the way through. I would make this a required field. Of course, I would upload my documentation. And now I'm on step 3 and I sign and I click next. And literally that easily, I built this whole marriage application process, and I was able to even apply for it directly here on the glass. So I'm going to pause there for one more second. I'm going to look and see if there's any questions specific to this build. Otherwise, we're going to go back and we're going to do a lot more of the questions at the end. I see there's questions in both the chat and in the Q&A. So there's a question here about, look, I just saw you pull this all together. You use some pre-built components like a signature panel, like first name, last name, etc. And the question is, does that mean that complex customizations require Unqork engineers to add them? And if that's the case, doesn't that still slow you down? Don't you still need code? What I think I'll do is I'll actually use the next use case to show you how, even if you want to bring in something totally new, something that we've never seen before, still you don't need code. So I'm going to answer that question actually with our next example. So what I want to do here is show how to bring something totally new. A complex external data service, something that has never been integrated into Unqork, something that our engineers didn't have to get involved. It's still just a no-code configurator like me. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll show you what I did earlier this morning. Is I went out and I found this 18 fun APIs for your next project. So I wanted to check them just to see what they were all about ahead of time to make sure that everything here would be safe for work. I first checked out the Chuck Norris facts, and it's truly fascinating, but there's a lot of things in there that are not safe for work, all the way down to lyrics. But anyway, I found this service which is a trivia application. So it's some database out there of questions and answers. And I said, well, what would it take to actually integrate this totally new external service. It's offered by the fine folks at JService. No endorsement. I have no idea who they are. And allow me to build an Unqork application that's a trivia app. So let's go do that. We're going to build that right now. So I will come back here. I'm going to clean up some of this stuff so I don't have 5,000 tabs open. We can get rid of that. You guys could go check out the Chuck Norris thing afterwards if there's interest. And okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build a trivia application using that totally new capability from JService. So what I did is I cut and pasted here, and it looks like JService. They provide this capability. It's called jservice.io, and here is the endpoint from JService. So if you take this this API that they're providing, and if I wire that into Unqork, I'm going to be able to get questions and answers. And the way that you could do that is you come into our administration section, and now you can add a new service. Again, you don't need any coders to do this. So you come in, and I'm going to add the trivia service. And very simply, I'm going to paste in that endpoint. We support very complex authentication. This particular API doesn't need any authentication, but pretty much anything out there that you need on both new as well as legacy systems. So if I add that service, great. It was just added into Unqork. And now I could actually use that trivia service anywhere I need it. So let's make a new module. This time I won't use workflow. I'm just going to build a new module completely from scratch. And I won't spend too much time making it so beautiful. But for example, I can bring in 2 columns here. And on the left side, I'm going to bring in the question. And this is where we're going to go out to that external service, and we're going to get a question in real time. And on the right side, I'm going to bring in the answer. Maybe, depending on how much time we have, I think we're doing okay. We could get fancy, and we could hide the answer, or we could do like a multiple choice answer to see if we could build a whole scoring mechanism and see if you can get it correct. But I'm going to start pretty simply right here. And now here, to answer the questioner's topic, I'm going to show how you could do a very complex integration without any code. So I'm going to bring in what we call a plugin. A plugin is just a way to go out and get external data. And in this case, I'm going to call it my get trivia question. And now over here, I have all of these services that are in this demo environment. So I'm going to choose that trivia service that I just added. There's also many Unqork services. This is our out-of-the-box API. And I'm going to wire this up to a button in a second, so you'll see actually how I can fire going off and getting this data when someone presses a button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to map a question that comes from the service to the field on my side called question. Now, I named my fields the same thing as this API, but let's say on their side, it was called Q&A. Well, you would just type in what they call it on their side, but it happens to be called question and answer. And when I save this, all I have to do now is just add one more thing. I'm going to add a button. I'm going to bring it in right over here, and we're going to say get question. This is going to be the get question button. And what this is going to do is it's going to actually fire that integrator, that plugin, as I showed you. And if I wire this all together, and here's, I have to name this. So this is the trivia app demo. These errors are actually good because they prevent, in all cases, bugs from being introduced. So for example here, just to show, I made an error that anyone could make. I forgot to name my module. And when I saved it, it was actually telling me that the module path is required. And even more so, if I tried to use a module name that someone else had used, well, if you were typing it in, you might be able to make a bug, but in this case, it would block me. So if we go to preview, I'll show you how this works. And let's see if it works. I will press get question. And now what I need to do is I need to do a little bit of debugging here to actually see what aspect of this, to show a little bit more of the technical, what actually is going out and what is not bringing back the data. So if we look here, this is actually what the browser is specifically doing, how it's actually going out in order to get the questions and the answers. And this is the data that is coming back, and it's showing that I have a question here and an answer over here. So we could see that the API is working. That's the first test. And now what I would need to do is essentially just take the data that's coming back from the API and wire it into my questions over here. So I can go back into the plugin and we could say, okay, well, we know that this is working. And there we go. I made a mistake. What I did is I actually wired, and I didn't do this on purpose. This is just the live demo, but this is the beauty of no code. I actually told this service that they were inputs, that I was actually sending it a question and an answer. But I saw right there, nope, it was actually an output. I'm getting a question and an answer back from the service. And that quickly, I was able to just diagnose it. I go in, I save it, and if I reload, you'll now see, even during a demo like this, you can make a mistake. And if I do the get question, now we're seeing it. So he starred in 1948 Symphony in Spinach. This sovereign visited several Commonwealth nations. And some say, Heathers and pump up the volume. It's better to shoot first than ask this actor. So we could have a lot more fun if we have time towards the end of this and I could build out more features. But I did want to show just one more really important distinction between low code and no code. So let's go back out here. Running business logic without user interaction. And this is a very important one. So often, in order to get systems to do things on their own, really the low code approach and the historic approach is you have to code. You have to just write code. So like in that case, if you send it this piece of data, you've got to manipulate and send this piece of data back. We have an allergy to code. There's no code allowed in Unqork. So even running business logic without a user doing it all runs without code. And let me show you an example of this. And this is going to get a little bit more technical, so bear with me. But I think the audience will enjoy it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make one more module. I'm going to call it my risk scoring example. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a social security number, a fake one, because this is working in a sandbox. It's not my social. And it's going to go out to a credit score bureau and it's going to return the customer, in this case, is credit score. But more importantly, what it's going to do is actually take that credit score and then run some rules based on it. So let me show you how this would work. If I go into some of our out-of-the-box templates and I search in this case for our credit score module, this is integrated with many of the popular credit bureaus. And again, if there was a new credit bureau that wasn't integrated, well, you would just set it up the exact same way you saw me do the question and answer module. So this module that I just dragged in, it's going to go out and it's going to get a credit score. Let me just show you how that works so you can kind of see how this thing gets built in real time. And for those, someone just asked a question, what are you dismissing every time you're hitting that remove button? What's really cool about Unqork also is you can have multiple look and feel. So today I'm showing you a pretty simple look and feel, but you can actually change how something looks. You see how that looks totally different. This is going to look totally different. All of that is available essentially out of the box, and you get to design and decide what is your favorite look and feel. So there, I'm going to go with that one. I like that one the most. So I'm going to show you how this module works. If I put in a fake social, again, it's not mine. I go out and it went and it got that credit score of 649, and we'll put in another, and it went out and it got the 595. But now here's where the trick really comes into play. How can I take an action based on your credit score? Well, let's say based on your credit score, I'm working at a bank and I am trying to figure out if I should issue you a loan or not. So based on your credit score, I just want to decide, are you low, medium, or high risk to the bank? So I'm going to bring in one more component, call it our radio box. And what this is going to do, it's going to set a risk score for you, okay? And we're going to keep this relatively straightforward. You will have three different types of risks. You will have a high risk, a medium risk, and a low risk, okay? And you see now those are new fields that are added. Well, now here's how you do logic without code. I'm bringing in one of the most powerful tools in Unqork. It's called our decision component. And the decision component essentially allows you to write rules without code. So I'm going to set the risk score for this customer coming to apply for a loan. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to watch their credit score. And their credit score is a range of values, right, from 0 to 850. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set their risk score based on the credit score that comes back. I'm going to give it a value. And one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a message, because maybe certain credit scores, if it's too low, I don't even want to do business with you at my bank. So now to write the decision, it just is basically like an Excel table. And we actually support all Excel formulas as well. So we'll say, let's say your credit is between 0 and 625. We're going to rate you a low, but we're going to say, sorry, please find another bank, because we don't want your business. But if you're 626 to 700, we'll still rate you a low, but we want you. If you're 701 to 765, you're a medium. 766 and higher, you're going to be a high. I got those backwards. So if you have a bad score, you're a higher risk, and now you're a low. Perfect. The other thing you could do in no code is you could test your rules right here. And this is difficult to do in low code environments, because you have to write more code to test But right here, I could basically just type in a credit score and run it. Okay, great. That gave me the exact answer I wanted. Okay, that also rated me a low. So I'm going to save this. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you, what does this look like if you were a user? But that's not our eventual goal. Remember, our eventual goal is, how do you run this without a user? How do you run it just as a computer process? So I'm going to type in again a random social. And what it did is it instantly went out, and it actually, you'll see it rated me a 755, and it called me a medium. Or I could go over here, and it's a medium again. Let's change it. Let's try to keep getting good credit scores. There we go, 556. So this time the credit score was so bad that it rated me a high, and it's telling me to please find another bank. So that's all possible. It's actually very tricky to do in a low code environment, but here's what's nearly impossible in a low code environment. I'm going to take it one step further. Now, let's say you want to take this business logic and use it throughout your organization. So you coded it. So great, there's a screen for me to apply for a mortgage, and it's going to give me my risk. But now let's say you want to embed this in another application or give it to your customer service reps. You could take that exact same logic, which was visual, and now in no code, you could express it without any user interaction. And the way that we do that, what we do is we call it a server-side execution. And for those of you that are familiar with a little bit of the way that web APIs work, what I'm showing you here is just a harness. And again, this is going to get a little bit technical, but what I'm going to do, pass in a field for my social security number. So imagine now I'm in this external system, and I'm passing in my social. And again, I'm just going to put in a fake social. And when I run this, I'm executing it totally headlessly. So imagine now I'm an external system. I'm coming to Unqork. I'm running this rule. You could see, it was kind of magical what just happened there. I passed in this social security number. I didn't have to type it into the form or anything. This is all happening behind the scenes. And it actually ran the same algorithm. It went out to the credit provider, got the 736, and it gave me the medium. And again, let's change this, and we'll see if we can get another score. Great. Now I got a high. And even more so, you are actually able to validate. So you can run whether or not there are errors. So in this case, you see it actually came back, and I got a risk score that was so bad that it is telling me that I need to find another bank. And one other thing that's very cool that you can do is you are able to actually step through the response. So again, this is, you couldn't dream of doing this in a coded system, but what you could do here is I could actually debug and go step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end, and it'll actually show me what my credit risk score is and that message. So again, I know a bit technical, but hopefully it helped to set some of the foundation. So I've been flying. We've got a little bit over 10 minutes left. I would love to turn to some questions now. So give me a moment. I'm going to pivot out of here. What I will choose to do is probably skip over some of the results to make sure that we do have time to get to the questions. I'll summarize here just in about a minute, really what are some of the most important results that you get from no code, and a lot of them should probably be self-evident. The number one thing, and this is truly the single thing you need to measure yourself by, is we are radically faster than low code, radically faster. Things that take 3 to 6 or 9 to 12 months in a low code environment take days or maybe a couple of weeks or a month or two in no code. Changes are, as you saw, vastly easier. I actually made a mistake as I was building, and I pasted in the fields in the wrong place. Could you imagine how long that would have taken to fix if it was written in code? You'd need, to be an expert to be able to find it. And as important, I just want to point out, the total cost of ownership of no code is so much lower than low code. Now, low code does save you a little bit of money off of the old-fashioned techniques, but the total cost of ownership in no code goes down so much lower because I don't have to maintain the code. There's no more maintaining the legacy and everything moving forward. And ultimately, the punchline, just to show you the way the market lays out right now, if you're thinking about finding a high-performance tool, like a no-code tool, in order to accelerate your development needs, you really have this spectrum. Things could be simple capabilities or enterprise. So am I building a loan origination system? Well, that's enterprise. Or am I building a survey? That's simple. And things could be easier to build and harder to build. And this is the way the market looks today. This is before Unqork, of course. So you do have single-use no-code platforms. There's actually great ones out there, like SurveyMonkey to build a survey, or Squarespace to build a website, and there's many others, marketing systems, Airtable to build spreadsheets. These are all great single-use no-code platforms. The low-code platforms give you some more capabilities. They are increasingly a little bit harder to build with because you have these proprietary languages all the way down to code. The real punchline, though, is enterprise no-code. The whole point of us creating a platform like ours is we were able to do the most complex, but still maintain that ease of building as if you were building a website or if you were building something simple. So thanks for getting through that first portion with me. What I would love to do now is I am going to get to a couple of the questions here. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so forgive me for ones that we may not be able to get to. I also see a lot that are pasted directly into the chat. Okay, so one great question. Will there be a need for architects in these platforms of the future, especially from the client side? Will it be possible for configurators themselves to reach architect level? What skills are required for architects? It's a fascinating topic. Actually, our CEO and founder, Gary Hoberman, he held a topic just on enterprise architecture yesterday. He did a LinkedIn Live. We'll try to email around to the attendees a link to that. So here's how it plays out. There will always be a role for enterprise architects. In fact, enterprise architects that know how to build software are often our very most favorite of customer and the very biggest advocates for Unqork. Because if you've been building software for 25 years, and you only have the old techniques, coded techniques. Maybe you played around with low code. And now this kind of platform comes along where you're able to save radical time, and you're able to do it while still enabling configurators to move in an environment that you set up that's safe. It's an enterprise architect's dream. What we find, and it's a natural graduation path, is that people who learn how to do some basic configuration to start can continue their certification and graduate up to the enterprise architect levels. There's another question here. What makes Unqork special versus other systems? And, without having to go into the specifics, what truly makes Unqork special is the enterprise complexity and the fact that we're doing no code. So if you think about the three dynamics here, it's visual, it's drag and drop. That's one. It is done with the most complex application. So we have all the tooling that you need to create loans, to support New York City through a pandemic, so on and so forth. And the third component is that it has the enterprise-grade security all in one place. There's nothing out there that has those three differentiating components, and it's what allows people that use our platform to respond at the speed of a crisis, to build things for the most regulated industries out there. There's a question: how does no code implement new features, like a price slider? Would that be a standalone feature? Would it be developed specific to a customer? And here's another amazing thing about our approach. So in a no-code platform, and particularly an enterprise one like we have, we've now basically crowdsourced years and years, thousands and thousands of requirements from businesses out there. It's unlikely, though it happens occasionally, that we come across something so brand new that we've never seen before. So, for example, a range slider. Maybe day one we didn't have that. Good point. there was a feature where someone needed to spell out the numbers that were on a check. Very straightforward, very easy to create. You could create it without code. You could also create it in a module. Some of these things didn't exist in the earliest of days. So we do have a constant backlog where we are very frequently making enhancements. And all of this is driven by our customer need. At this point, there is nearly nothing, in fact, almost nothing that you can't do without using the no-code capability. And of course, we're always finding more and more features. A question, does no-code mean moving away from batch processes? Absolutely. So, for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with the batch process, batching is when sometimes you don't have a direct connection to another system. So you batch up, let's say, a bunch of loans that you want to send to a system, and you send them all at once at the end of the day. Well, if the system that's still receiving the data from Unqork needs to get it in batches, Unqork can send it in batches. Part of the trick here is it's hard sometimes to replace the legacy, the back end. Of course, you could rebuild it in Unqork in record time, but let's say you want to leave it there. And what you're able to do in Unqork is you can maintain batching, though we would recommend that you don't need to, because everything can become a live API. A question about, does Unqork support data extraction from uploaded documents? Yeah, it's a piece of what we do. Essentially, we integrate some of the best-in-class OCR packages out there. So many data extraction tools live in our marketplace, and there's more and more that other third parties are adding every day. So if you have a need to, let's say, take some data off of old-fashioned PDFs, scan some documents, all of that can be done, and Unqork is a very powerful tool to orchestrate all of that. If I'm an insurance company, obviously one of our target markets, what will be my starting point to get a claims application? How will Unqork be faster to customizing that claims product? So the benefit to those that are in the regulated industries in which we started, financial services, insurance, healthcare, and now the public sector working for cities, the benefit to those customers is we've, like I said, crowdsourced thousands and thousands of requirements, and they're all on the platform. So if you want a claim system, you come in, you drag and drop templates for claims, and they're all live, and you're able to use them. If you want to make changes to those templates, you pick and choose the fields you want, you rename them, you make all the alterations you need. Now, the nice thing that's also happening is for newer industries, as we continue to expand both geographically, we opened up an office in the UK, we're already live in Asia. As we expand, our global partners are also helping us by building new functionality that we never even dreamed of. Because the beautiful thing about the Unqork platform is that you could open it up out into the world. So someone built a different type of claim system than we had. Someone else built a patient onboarding system. Someone else built a CRM system to knock out some of those big CRM players. All of that is possible, and it's an ever-increasing set of rich templates in Unqork. Here's a great question. What clouds do you run on? What databases does your platform offer? So clouds, we're cloud agnostic. We run on the big three, AWS, Azure, and GCP, Google Cloud. We let our customer choose which cloud they want. So it is a entirely hosted environment. So it's a SaaS product. The other thing is it's a single tenant product. This will get to the database. We create environments, all done, push button. We create an environment for each customer anywhere in the world they want. So for your business in the US, you run in AWS on the West Coast. Your business in Europe, you run it out of UK and Azure. We don't care, we give you the flexibility. But what is always the case, your data is single tenant. It is segmented from anyone else. The database behind the scenes happens to be MongoDB Atlas. They're a very close partner. We love their product. You don't need to worry about the database because behind the scenes, all of it is stored natively inside of Mongo, though it's not locked in there. It's not a black box. We give all of our customers complete access to that data so they could stream it out in real time as well. I'm going to check one more in the chat. What about scale? Maybe I'll close with this question. It's one that's been particularly top of mind these days. Just to a short aside, I think I shared a little bit at the top, since the early days of the crisis that we're in right now, New York City, and then eventually Washington, D.C., and a number of other cities have been running their pandemic response on our platform, many portions of the public aspect of it. And when you do that, you need to know that you can scale to the size of a city like New York, and it's, you know, over 8 million residents, or the scale and speed of a pandemic and everything that's coming in. We had been battle tested before in the most complex financial services environments, where people are doing trading systems and pumping millions of transactions and billions of dollars of premiums and loans through the platform. And all of that has worked brilliantly. We've scaled perfectly through all of it. But what the current crisis has shown us is we're also scaling at the speed of a crisis. So scaling doesn't just mean how many users can you get in, like everyone from a city literally simultaneously going to an application to say they're hungry and they need a food delivered to them, but also how quickly can you build the applications. Every 3 days, working with a jurisdiction, can you pop out the next new app to feed people, to trace them, to track them, to get them medical supplies. All of those things have been tested in real time, and we could say with certainty we're able to handle the biggest scalable problems out there. So I would like to wrap. It's been an absolute pleasure today getting an opportunity to spend so much time. There was, you know, a great number of you that joined, and very, very happy with the turnout. Tons of questions. I'm sorry, it looks like there's a couple of dozen I didn't even get to. Maybe we'll host another series where we just dive even more into no code. We will have a recording of this webinar for you to get access to, share with your friends. And otherwise, it was a pleasure speaking with everyone today. And